Hello and welcome to episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Tuesday, August 8th. Hope everyone's having a good day so far and a good rest of their day yesterday. We've got a lot to get into today on a Tuesday program coming off of a packed night last night in the world of sports, especially if you're a New York Jets fan. You had one Jets drive last night. Really, it's going to be a packed couple days if you're a New York Jets fan because you had one Jets drive last night. You've got Hard Knocks tonight, episode number 1 of 5. You've got joint practices tomorrow and Thursday, day off Friday, and then you've got preseason games Saturday against the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. And then next week, you have another one Jets Drive episode, another Hard Knocks episode, more joint practices, another preseason game. So things are really ramping up as we get into the dog days of summer, as we get deeper into August here, August 8th. So an exciting time to be a New York Jet fan. I had to start off with that. We'll get to the Jets and Giants later on as both teams get set for joint practices. Giants today against the Lions, and the Jets will open up tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday in Carolina with joint practices against the Panthers. So looking forward to following those for both teams coming up. We got to start today with baseball, though. The Yankees last night with another pathetic performance. Good win for the Mets. They get the job done. Pete Alonso had a huge night. A couple hours after they optioned Brett Beatty, which sent, I shouldn't say shockwaves, but surprised a little bit of people. Anytime a young prospect gets sent back down, it's always a little bit of surprising. It's always a little alarming. But the Mets send him down. Alonso with a big game. Mets win 11-2 over a Cubs team that's been red hot recently, and over a Cubs team that's definitely in the playoff race, especially after some of the moves they made at the deadline, bringing in guys like Jameer Candelario. Obviously, they held on to Cody Bellinger. So game 1 of the 3-game set, Mets get the job done. Yankees do not against a terrible Chicago White Sox team. And it was just about the same theme as Sunday's loss, where they left a village on base last night, and they still can't score. We'll get to the Boone ejection. We'll get to the game last night. We'll start with the Yankees. Then we'll get to the Jets and Giants, talk a little football. It's August. Thankfully, football is training camps in full swing, so we have that to follow. You've got the excitement of Hard Knocks tonight. Super fired up about that to try and cope or to try and shield the terrible baseball that we continue to have to watch here in New York, even with the Mets win last night. I mean, let's be honest here. They're still not going anywhere. The games don't really mean anything for the Mets. A win's nice anytime you get one. A lot better than the Yankees last night. And we'll get to the Yankees. We'll also, get you ready for the Yankees-White Sox tonight. We'll get you ready for Mets-Cubs tonight and get you on your way here on this Tuesday program. But we have to start here with the Yankees. So obviously after they split 2 of 4 at Yankee Stadium against the Astros, they won on Thursday, lost on Friday, won on Saturday, lost on Sunday. As I mentioned yesterday, I was in attendance for Sunday's game at Yankee Stadium. Always a great time going to a Yankee game, but walked out of there disappointed, walked out of there frustrated with the way they lost the game, leaving a village of runners on base. You go into this series against the White Sox, and you go into it with 3 games against a really bad White Sox team. This is a White Sox team that came into the series 23 games below 500 at 45-68. They are dysfunctional. You're hearing more and more reports about, the locker room, and there's been some fights, and there's been some incidents of toxic culture. We've heard Keenan Middleton, who's a new pitching acquisition for the Yankees, who they brought over at the deadline, the Yankees' big deadline acquisition, talked about how there was guys sleeping in the bullpen. There's no rules. There's no culture. There's no structure. And all of that, you go into 3 games against a White Sox team that isn't any good, against a White Sox team that's been one of the biggest disappointments in baseball, right up there with the Yankees and the Mets, and even throw the Padres in that conversation, and the Cardinals. And you go in there last night, and you get smoked. You lose 5-1. And you go in there last night with the expectation of you got to find a way and at least take 2 of 3 against Chicago to open up 19 of 25 on the road. And the Yankees go in there, don't do a single thing. They walk out of there, down 1 game in the series. They walk out of there, waste another good start from Garrett Cole. They walk out of there, leaving a village on base. 13 runners left on base last night. And they walk out, losers, 5-1 to one of the worst teams, one of the biggest disappointments in baseball, the Chicago White Sox. And now you look at the standings, the Yankees just continue to drop. They are now 58-55 in the year. They are 12 and a half games back of 12 and a half games back in the division. They are back to last place, sole possession of last place in the division. And they are now way back of the Red Sox, and they're now behind the Red Sox again, and obviously still behind Seattle in the wild card race. 5.5 games back now of a wild card. This is getting into territory that is you can't make up in a month and a half span. The Mariners are red hot right now. They've won 5 straight. They've got one of the easiest schedules in baseball left. The Blue Jays have won 4 straight. The Red Sox got the job done. They've been struggling. They're 3-7 their last 10, but they did win last night on a walk-off 3-run home. I believe it was a 3-run homer to get the job done there. So they jumped the Yankees, and the Yankees continue to lose. They are now 4-6 in their last 10. They've lost 2 straight games, Sunday and in last night. They've lost them in the same ways, leaving guys on base left and right. How many times do the Yankees have to leave guys on base with the bases loaded? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's crazy. It is so painful to watch this team. But back to the wild card here for a second before we get to last night's game and before we get to the inability to score runs and the inability for this team to come through in big spots. You go to you look at the standings. 2.5, 3 games out is one thing, right? That's doable. But once you get into the 5.5, 6 games out, that's where things get ugly. Like, you look at the Mets right now, they are 7.5 games out. If the Yankees, let's just say, lose these next 2 games, they might be right there with the Mets, who aren't even trying to win. I mean, that's how bad this Yankee team is right now. And that's what we have to watch every single night. They're 5.5 games out. That is a big mountain to climb. Being 3 games out's one thing, but once you get into the 5, like I said, 5 plus, 5.5, 6, once you get into the 7-game out range, it's over. Forget about it. Like the Angels, they've lost 7 straight. I mean, they've been an absolute disaster since the deadline, who they picked up many pieces. They've been a disaster. They're now 2 games under 500. They're 8 games out of a wild card spot. They went all in for a wild card. And it's been an utter disaster for the Angels. The Yankees are headed in that direction, though. They are now 5.5 games back. And I talked about this yesterday. As much as it seems like recently the Yankees have maybe been trying to play, or maybe seems like they're playing a little bit better at baseball. Again, I'll put on my positive mindset here for a second. They split against the Astros. The Astros are 64-49. They're currently hold the second wild card spot, right? But still, they've lost so much ground. Like they were 3.5. They were like 2.5, 3 games out about the beginning of last week, like a couple weeks ago. They've now dropped to 5.5 out. I mean, that's how bad it is. That's how bad this team's been. That's how ugly it's been. And every night, this team rolls the same lineup out there. They didn't do a single thing at the deadline, and we sit here 5.5 games out of a wild card spot now. The season's over, as I mentioned many times. The Yankees, at best, this Yankee team at best, is mediocre. They love settling for mediocrity. I'll give you some numbers to show. They've scored 485 runs this year. They have allowed 485 runs this year. Their run differential is 0. Anytime you get to 0 or in the negatives, that means you're having a bad year. They are 50-50 in the last 100 games. 500 baseball. They are 99-101 in their last 200 games. So when you look at this Yankee team, they are mediocre. They are an average baseball team at best. And they've been that way really over the last year and a half, 2 years. Because outside of the hot start last year, they were an average team going into the playoffs. They were an average team going into, at best, going into this season, because it was the same lineup outside of Volpe coming in that they rolled out there when they got swept in the ALCS, and they rolled out there in the month of August last year where they couldn't hit. And they thought they was going to change. They thought something would magically, a spell would cast on this Yankee team, and they would all of a sudden start to hit. I mean, this team's, it really is, this team is at best an average 500 baseball team. That's what they are. They're a low 80-win team. Fangraphs is projecting the last wild card spot in the AL is going to go to a team with 90 wins. The Yankees, I think, are projected like 82, 83 wins. They talked about this last night in the Yes broadcast. They had 50 games left. Now they have 49 left. But they would had to go, it was something like 32-18, which they haven't had that stretch this entire season. Their best stretch, I think, was like 31-9. Their best stretch was, 30-15 or something like that. Like, it wasn't, or no, 30, I think it was like 30 and was it 30-20 or something like that. It wasn't 32-18. So they would have to play even better than they played, and they're playing a lot worse. This team's not making the playoffs. But to last night's game specifically, I mean, you can't make this up. You're sitting there watching the game if you haven't given up on the team yet, which, look, I will watch this team. I will continue to watch this team. That's just the way I am. I'm a loyal fan. I'm not going to give up. I don't blame you if you're not watching the team anymore. I'm not going to call you a fair weather fan because I don't blame you. I mean, it's painful. I will still sit there and watch. I will also watch so I know when I come on these shows, so I know, obviously when I do a podcast every day, I've got to know what I'm talking about, so watching the game helps me know what I'm talking about, but I seriously don't know how much more of this I can take. Just to give you the numbers, against Houston on Sunday, which we talked about this yesterday, so I won't spend too much time on this, they left 15 runners on base on Sunday, as I mentioned yesterday. They went 3 for 12 with runners in scoring position. They had many opportunities, especially late in the game, to come through, and they couldn't. Last night, they had 13 runners left on base. They went 1 for 12 with runners in scoring position. So through the last 18 innings of baseball, on Sunday and in last night, the Yankees combined have left 28 runners on base, and they are a combined 4 for 24 with runners in scoring position. I mean, that is pathetic. That is embarrassing. That is new levels of bad offensive baseball. Going 4 for 24 in 2 games with runners in scoring position, and one of those was a sacrifice fly by Billy McKinney. What is that going to do? I mean, it was the only time the Yankees scored last night was a sac fly by Billy McKinney. And they had twice, one time they had bases loaded, nobody out, 2 short flyouts, and a ground out. And I don't want to hear, the first, I believe it was, I think it was Vaughn or Sheets playing first. I believe it was Vaughn who was playing first and made that really, really, really nice play. It was Vaughn on Bowers. And I'll admit, it was a really nice play. But you can't sit there and say, great play, unlucky. That's just unlucky. It is, but you can't use that as an excuse as to why you're not scoring with the bases loaded. I mean, the Yankees had bases loaded last night 3 different times. They scored once, and it was on a sac fly by Billy McKinney. And I will tell you this, something else about this Yankee team that's an issue, and we've talked about this a lot on the show, but it's not even, like, they'll get bases loaded, but last night they had 3 singles in a row to get bases loaded. We've talked about this so much, how this team is slow. I cannot stress enough, 3 singles should at least get you 1 run in. You should be able to score from second to first on a single. I mean, this team, there's so many guys on this team that are so slow. Like LeMahieu, it looks like he's in pain while he's running. Stanton, I don't have to talk about Stanton. I mean, and Stanton can't run. The guy can't run. But LeMahieu's extremely slow. And that's an issue too, is when you get on base, you get on second, for bases loaded, like this team, they usually are only getting 1 base because they're so slow. The guys on the bases are so slow. I mean, I'll admit, I'm not the fastest guy ever. I'll admit. I'm not. But, I mean, come on, you're in the MLB, and these guys are so slow, and we've talked about this. I said this last year. Get faster, get younger, get more athletic, and the Yankees didn't. And oh no, here we are again. This team lacks speed. This team lacks athleticism. You want to know what this team has, though? A bunch of old, washed-up players and a bunch of guys that can't hit with runners in scoring position. And then you hear Aaron Boone last night, which, look, I know the Yankee fan base is kind of split on the Aaron Boone ejection last night because he did get ejected on a ball that was actually a strike. You know how I feel about Boone. I don't like Boone. I don't like Cashman. I don't like Hal. They're the three stooges. I think Boone and Cashman have to go. Look, I understand there is a part of this. I do think there is a part where Boone doesn't have much control. I see that aspect of it, but I also do think Boone is not a very good in-game decision maker. You want to blame Cashman for the lineup making? You want to blame Cashman for the roster construction? By all means, go ahead, do it. But in terms of the bullpen, some of the in-game decision, the lack of accountability, that's Aaron Boone, in my opinion. I know some people have their different view on it. I know some people last night feel that the ejection from Boone was, like, people are tired of it. They're sick of him getting ejected. And then the team's still losing. I get it. I enjoyed watching the ejection, I will admit. I am one of the fans that this doesn't make me all of a sudden love Aaron Boone. I still don't think he's a good manager. But last night was an epic ejection. And if you're a baseball fan and you take away your fandom, like, if you hate Aaron Boone, just take that away for a second and just watch that as just a non-biased baseball fan. That was one of the most epic ejections I've ever watched. I understand if you're sick and tired of him getting ejected and him going out there and giving off this vibe that he's this big hothead and then go into the locker room and hold nobody accountable and go into the press conference and say stupid things, because he did have a stupid quote last night that I'll mention here in a second, but he drew the line, pretended to be Laz Diaz. It was an epic ejection. It reminded you of the old days where, I remember the Pirates manager a while back went over and was picking up bases and throwing them. They would go down to each umpire, first base, third base umpire, and they would, he would yell in his face, get a piece of his mind. So it was like an old school epic ejection, I will admit. But what he said last night made no sense. And I guess I understand what he's saying, so I shouldn't say it doesn't make any sense. But he mentioned how they're getting runners on, and that's good to see. And now they're putting together good at-bats, and that's good progress. That's great. And he says, the hits will come, all this stuff. Like, what? Like, here's my thing. Yes, you're getting runners on, but you shouldn't be complimenting the guys for getting runners on and then acting like it's okay to just leave the bases loaded every time. I mean, it's bases loaded, nobody out. Bases loaded, nobody out. And you can't get a single run across. The least you could do is work a walk. I mean, Dylan Cease was walking everybody last night. The guy had 6 walks, or I believe it was 6 or 7 walks. I mean, in the Yankees last night, again, similar to, they walked 12 times on Sunday. Last night they walked 8 times. They've walked 20 times in the last 2 games. Had all these runners on, and they've lost both games. I mean, Dylan Cease last night walked 7 guys. The least you could do is work a walk like they did on Sunday. But enough of this. Give me a break with we're getting runners on, which is a good thing, but no accountability. It doesn't. Getting runners on shouldn't be hard in the MLB. You shouldn't be complimenting a baseball team for getting runners on base. You should be complimenting a baseball team if they can get those runners in, which the Yankees can't. It's a disaster. I mean, this team is a disaster. They wasted another good outing from Garrett Cole. I know his line got messed up a little bit because when Canely came in, they were hitting off of him. But all in all, 7 innings, 5 hits, 4 runs, 2 walks, 3 Ks. Worked into the 8th, allowed 2 singles, allowed the 1 homer. Not much else Garrett Cole could do last night. He worked into the 8th inning. The Yankees can't get hits. They can't hit. They get runners on. They can't score. Again, 28 left on base in the last 2 games. 4 of 24 with runners in scoring position in the last 2 games. And I'm not trying to sit here and act like anytime you get runners in scoring position, you got to score. It's going to happen. You're going to have times where you're going to get first and second, 1 out, or second and third, 1 out, or second and third, nobody out, and you're not going to score. It happens. But when it's happening every single game, when it's been happening for years now, this Yankee team for a couple years now has not been any good with runners in scoring position. They haven't been any good because they don't have the guys in the lineup that can step up and put together a nice contact swing and drive runners in. They don't have that in the lineup. They have a bunch of guys that just swing for the fences and hope they connect on one. That's what it is. So, again, I don't know how much longer. I know they might call Everson Pereira. I don't know how much longer until you just put Judge on the IL. And this isn't a knock on Judge. This is just, this team's not going anywhere. I'd rather them just call quits, call up young guys, call quits, put Rodon in the IL for the rest of the season. Sevy is still slated to start. He's probably going to start now because Rodon's on the IL. That's a whole other mess of itself. I mean, Rodon's had 2 IL stints already. This is crazy. He had an IL stint to start the season. Now he's got another IL stint. I mean, to say that his first season has been an absolute dumpster fire is an understatement. I would just shut Rodon down. I would. He's made 6 starts. He's looked terrible in all 6 of them. Or 4 of the 6, I'm sorry. He pitched 5 1/3 in the other 2. That's why you pay a guy $162 million to pitch into the 6th inning. What am I? What do I know? What do I know, right? But yeah, it's bad. I don't know if they will just eventually IL Judge for the rest of the season, just hang it up. They're 5.5 games out. There's a good chance they're going to walk out of Atlanta next Wednesday night, head back home to the Bronx after this 9-game road trip to continue this tough stretch 6-7 games out. There's a good chance they go into Atlanta and get swept. There's a good chance they go into Miami and lose 2 or 3. What am I talking about? There's a really good chance they lose these next 2. There's a really good chance they lose 2 or 3 against Chicago, because I could tell you this, if Sevy's on the mound on Wednesday, they're probably not winning. So even if they win tonight, they're probably going to lose the series against a White Sox team that is horrific, even worse than the Yankees. So, I don't know. Again, just more and more about this team. I would like to think that, the one positive you get out of losing, that even though there is really no positive, is hopefully this is all just going to end up in a cleaning of the house, where you fire Cashman, you fire Boone, you blow it up, you restart, bring in somebody that can make all the decisions. If it is true, if the reports are true that Howell wanted Cashman to buy and Cashman didn't want to buy, and that's why they stood pat at the deadline, then Howell just, step away. Bring in a president of baseball operations, bring in a guy that can oversee everything, bring in new faces, bring in a head coach that's going to hold guys accountable, get rid of this whole analytical approach. Look, old school managers, I like the idea of an old school manager coming in. There's a risk that comes with it, because we've seen examples of old school managers working. We've also seen examples of old school managers not working. Tony La Russa didn't work, rather. He didn't work. Half the time he's probably showing up to the games drunk. Tony La Russa didn't work. Dusty Baker, old school manager, he's worked with Houston. Bruce Bochy, old school manager, he worked in San Francisco. He's now working in Texas. Buck Showalter, it's kind of 50-50, however you see it. From, an outside point of view, you could, I think some Mets fans are split on where the blame goes. I think there's some blame on Buck, but Epler didn't provide him with the best either. They're, Buck's almost like Boone too. Like Boone and Buck are similar, because there's definitely been some questionable comments from both of them. There's been a lack of accountability from both of them. There's also been not a whole lot given to them in terms of a roster standpoint. There hasn't been a whole lot of talent that they can work with. Epler and Cashman are also blamed a lot for what the current product is of the Yankees and the Mets. So, however you gauge that, but Buck did lead a team to 101 wins last year. So, I'm not saying they're going to go out and get Buck Showalter, but I would personally go out and try and get an old school manager, somebody that's going to move away from the analytical approach. The analytical approach these days is, uppercut, go for exit velo, go for homers. Strikeouts are okay. You're going to strike out a lot, but you're going to hit for power. Get back to the basics. Get back to playing contact-driven baseball. Team hitting 1 through 9. None of this, we got 3 guys that can hit bombs at the top, but they're not good contact. We got to bring in contact hitters. Got to bring in some speed. Got to bring in some athleticism. Inject some youth into this team. I feel like we talked about this last year, but the Yankees chose to avoid it. So, anyway, that's where the Yankees stand. I want to hear your thoughts, though, in the comments down below. Where do you think the Yankees go if they, for a manager Do you want him old school? Do you don't care? Just anybody other than Boone and Cashman leading the way? What do you want? I mean, I know Theo Epstein's a big one. I don't even know if he'd come to New York. I mean, if you bring him in, I think that would be a big get. But, I mean, then again, who knows? Who knows at this point? I mean, I still don't think Cashman and Boone are going to get fired. I mean, out of all this, though, there's got to be a scapegoat. The scapegoat's probably going to be Boone. It just makes sense that way. You're probably not going to fire the GM and keep the manager. You usually fire the manager and keep the GM, or in any other sport head coach. But yeah, I mean, there has to be probably a scapegoat for this, I'd assume. But you really just don't know what the heck Hal's going to do, because if we're being honest, Boone and Cashman should have been fired 2 years ago after the 2021 debacle. If we're being honest, Boone and Cashman should have been fired after last season, after they got swept in the ALCS last year. So they should be fired again after this year, but you could have said the same thing for 2 years. I mean, I've been saying fire Cashman for years now. I think this is a great point, that many have brought up. And I'll leave you with this. Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman, or I should say Brian Cashman hired Aaron Boone the year after they were one game away from the World Series. They got to ALCS Game 7. They were one game away from the World Series. They lost to the Houston Astros. Since that point, they haven't gotten close. That's been the last time they were closest to a World Series. So basically, the team's gotten worse since that 2017 team where they were one game away. The Yankees haven't been that close since. The closest they got was Game 6 in 2019. Other than that, 2018, they got dominated in the ALDS. 2019, ALCS lost Game 6. 2020, ALDS lost. 2021, wild card. Last year, swept. This year, probably no playoffs. Everybody talks about the regular season success, getting in, but if you really look at it, what has Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman really done together? Other than make this team worse and worse, really, every year. It's kind of gotten worse every year. Since 2019, this team's gotten worse every year. It has. And it's now reaching the bottom point where they're not even going to be a playoff team. Does that finally open up Hal's eyes of making a decision and moving on and realizing, hey, this isn't working? It's only been 6 years. What's the deal there? So, who knows? I mean, they did get extensions. I mean, would Hal want to move on from, this? They're only in year one of their 4 years extensions. So, who knows? Anyway, we got to move on. We got to move on to a little bit of football here, because that's obviously the big positive in the world of New York sports. And Jets, Giants continue their training camp practices here today and continue them throughout the rest of August. Giants today are in Detroit for the joint practices against the Lions. Then they'll play a preseason game against the Lions. The Jets have a training camp practice today, and then they'll hit the road to Carolina for a couple days. Tomorrow and Thursday, they'll have joint practices in Carolina, and then they'll have the preseason game on Saturday. If you're a Jets fan, you're especially fired up because you had one Jets drive last night. That was awesome, 41-minute episode. If you haven't checked it out, definitely go check it out. Great job, as always, by everyone over there at 1JD Films. Always fun to watch those episodes. Always exciting every time those come out. And then tonight, you got Hard Knocks, which is a lot of fun. HBO Hard Knocks, first time the Jets are on it since 2010, the second year of Sexy Rexy, Rex Ryan. He became a training camp Hard Knocks star that year. You wonder who's going to be the star this year for the New York Jets. Who's going to be that Hard Knocks star. And it's going to be 5 episodes every Tuesday night, HBO, 10 Eastern to 11 Eastern, 1-hour episode. So you'll get that tonight. That's always fun to watch, just as an NFL fan, even if the Jets aren't on it. It's always fun, but now that the Jets are back on it, it's even more exciting. They always do a great job with Hard Knocks, and looking forward to seeing it, because this team's got a lot of tension on it. The Jets are where the Jets are the front and center, the focal point of the NFL. They have Aaron Rodgers, they have Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams, they've got all these pieces, they've got all this talent, and it's time to go out there and put it on the field. They've maxed out with 6 primetime games. They open up Monday night at home against Buffalo. That's as big as it gets. So, this Jet team, the media around it's just starting. All of the attention is really starting now, with the cameras officially coming into play, with Hard Knocks beginning tonight, one Jets drive last night, which they've obviously done since 2018. And it's just an exciting time. You continue to hear from Rodgers how much he's liking it here. You continue to hear all the positives about what he's bringing, not only as just just talent on the football field, finally providing talent to that quarterback position, but being a leader. We've continued to hear about him being a leader. We continue to hear about him helping out the young guys, helping out the defense, working with both sides of the football, continuing to build chemistry. Leadership's been one of the biggest things because, again, my biggest concern going into the whole Aaron Rodgers era was how committed would he be? Would he want to be a leader? Would he want to work well with the young guys? Or would it kind of go like it did in Green Bay where he didn't go out of his way to help the young guys, was frustrated with the young players? But it's been the complete 180 here. He's helping the young guys. He likes playing with the young guys. He's mentioned how he feels rejuvenated being around what is a primarily young locker room. Sure, there's a couple veterans in there, but it's a primarily young locker room. I mean, you've got a very young running back room. You've got a second-year wide receiver who's your number one. You've got a pretty young offensive line in terms of AVT. Becton's still young. Max Mitchell's still young. So you've got some young pieces there. You go to the defense. Quinnen Williams is still young. Quincy Williams is young. Jamin Sherwood young. Like Sauce Gardner young. Some of your big cornerstones, Quinnen, Garrett Wilson, Sauce, they're all young. I mean, Garrett Wilson and Sauce won Rookie of the Year last year, and I think that's rejuvenated Rodgers in a big way, is the young locker room around him. Having that energy at his age to be around young guys is helping him build up that energy, is helping him stay energized, is helping him be motivated and stay ready. This team's got a loaded talent, and you're seeing so far in training camp. Again, like Lazard's been good. He's had some drops, but he's been good. You're still seeing the offensive line try and kind of figure itself out. Becton obviously being the big question. It'll be interesting to see obviously what happens with Dalvin Cook and how all that all ends up playing out with the Dalvin Cook stuff. You've also heard Elliott involved. Do you go after a Chubb or Leonard Fournette? It'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. But there's been a lot of positives. He's spreading the ball around, getting the tight ends involved. And that's been one of the biggest things I think I've taken from training camp so far is the tight ends. The New York Jets haven't used tight ends in years. They haven't. And having Tyler Conklin, Jeremy Ruckert, and having Tyler Conklin, Jeremy Ruckert, and CJ Uzomah is huge for this team. And you're seeing Conklin, Uzomah, Ruckert, all of them getting involved. You're seeing all of them being utilized by Aaron Rodgers. Uzomah just came off the pup a couple weeks ago. He's been great. He's been great recently. Rodgers getting the ball to him. The Jets haven't had a legit tight end since, if you think about it, Dustin Keller, who was there during the Rex Ryan, Mark Sanchez days. That was the last time the Jets had a legit tight end. The Ryan Griffins, the Austin Seferian Jenkins of the world. The Jets finally have a tight end. They finally have guys that you can rely on in big spots, 3rd down and 5s, 3rd and shorts. Trust a big body player to go across the middle and make a big play. And you've seen that a lot during camp. You continue to see the continued progress from the receiving corps. So there's a lot to like from Jet Camp. There really is. And it's just beginning. You've got more preseason games coming up. As I mentioned, the joint practices against the Panthers are always big, especially for the offensive line, especially from an offensive line perspective, because you're going up against a different team. You're going to see first team against first team. I always thought, by the way, we just got news. Saints are signing Kareem Hunt. So that his name's off the board. Kareem Hunt is now off the board. We just got that news in right now. 12:22 Eastern. Saints are signing Kareem Hunt. So Leonard Fournette's still out there. Elliott's still out there. Dalvin Cook's still out there. But one of the veterans out there is now off the board. Not that I don't think the Jets had much interest in him, but he was a name. He was available. Jets fans, we were talking about him. He's now off the board. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Sal's mentioned this. Many coaches have mentioned this too. Like the joint practices are very important in terms of you're seeing first team against first team. Like you're seeing that. And that's been that's been very important. And that's something that you don't see much in the preseason. You see a lot of first team versus backups or backups versus backups. Joint practices, you're going to see that. And the offensive line's big. They're going up against a solid defensive line in Carolina. So if they do well, you feel good about it. Brian Burns, off the edge. Very good talent in Carolina. Seeing the defensive line, obviously, who's been very deep, but seeing it against another team's offensive line is going to be very important, I think, too, to really see what this defensive line is all about. The intensity just goes up a level because, you can only take away so much when you're going up against each other. when you actually go up against another team, that's where the intensity, that's where the energy level steps it up to another notch. So excited to see that. And obviously the Giants, as I talked about, they are in Detroit for joint practices against the Lions. They'll open up today with joint practices, and they'll obviously have a preseason game against the Lions to close things out as well. So, from a Giants perspective, you continue to want to see that preseason game's obviously Friday, so you'll get joint practices today and tomorrow, day off Thursday, Giants, Lions on Friday. For the Jets, joint practices tomorrow and Thursday, day off Friday, preseason game Saturday. And from a Giants perspective, look, you want to see, continue to want to see Darren Waller, continue to want to see Daniel Jones. The Daniel Jones-Darren Waller connection's been great, and I talked about this when they signed and they brought in Darren Waller. Darren Waller is one of the best tight ends in the NFL and when he's healthy. His biggest issue the last 2 years, he hasn't been healthy. When he's healthy, though, there are statistical categories that he's ranked right up there with guys like Travis Kelce, with guys like George Kittle. He is one of the best tight ends in football when he is healthy. And the Giants opted to not go out there and bring in a big-time number one receiver like a T. Higgins, or even going out on the open market when DeAndre Hopkins became available after he got cut. Some thought maybe the Giants would go after him, because when you look at this Giants receiving core, we've talked about it on here, is it good enough? But you've seen that this receiving core doesn't have to be dominant. Doesn't have to be one guy that's going to emerge, because your big number one guy is Darren Waller. And you've also got another solid tight end in Daniel Bellinger. And when they like to use a 12 personnel, Darren Waller is going to take up a lot of the attention. Daniel Bellinger will be there available. That's one of the most impressive things I think I've taken from listening and seeing what Giants training camp's been all about is Darren Waller, and is, his ability to make plays with Daniel Jones and the connection already. Similar to Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson, you've seen that connection already. Same thing with Daniel Jones and Darren Waller. It hasn't taken much for them to build chemistry. They seem to already have a really strong connection, a really strong chemistry already built, and you're only in early August. But again, for them, seeing them against other teams, joint practices are always really big, because you actually get to see your guys against other teams. See how other teams will attack you. Saquon's obviously out there. You still got the offensive line. You still have some questions, obviously in the secondary. Deonte Banks hasn't had the best camp so far. How does he match up against some of those Lions receivers? The Lions are a good team too, so you'll get a good, solid couple joint practices there for the Jets, or for the Giants and the Detroit Lions out there in Detroit before they play on Friday. So definitely a lot of things to look out for here over the next couple days in the NFL, or the Jets and the Giants world. Obviously, Hard Knocks tonight, 10 Eastern on HBO. So looking forward to that. All right, so with that being said, we'll now move on here and get you ready for the night in baseball, if any of you still want to watch baseball around here. So you got Yankees, White Sox game 2 of a 3-game set tonight. Clark Schmidt versus Touki Toussaint. Clark Schmidt's 7-6 with a 4.35 ERA. I believe it's Touki or Tauki, whatever it is. And then Toussaint is 1-4 with a 3.92 ERA. You go on over to Citi Field now. Mets Cubs game 2 of a 3-game set. Carlos Carrasco versus Jameson Taillon. Taillon 6-6 with a 5.36 ERA. Carrasco, he is 3-6 with a 6.60 ERA. And that's what's on tap tonight for New York baseball, the Yankees and the Mets. All right, so that'll do it for the podcast here today. Stay tuned for tomorrow. I might have a live stream out talking Jets. I will see. I plan on doing Jets live streams every Wednesday. Especially during the season, I plan on bringing people on to start the show and then doing just answering comments the rest of the show. I definitely plan on doing that. So I might just start doing that during Wednesdays and stuff, starting up. So stay tuned. Tomorrow might be live stream day. We also have the joint practices, so I might keep an eye too on the joint practices, follow those live, and then obviously do a joint practice recap and all that stuff. So stay tuned for that. Looking forward to that. We'll either have a video or a live stream up tomorrow. So just stay tuned, and that'll do it. Enjoy Hard Knocks tonight. Yankees, Mets as well. Yankees, White Sox, Mets, Cubs. For those of you that are still interested in the abysmal baseball that these two teams have put on display for us this year. So that'll do it for an episode of In the Trench, or that'll do it for an episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. As always, I will see you all back here tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.